Hey everyone, welcome to SFDC Stop, and in this video we are going to learn about Dynamic Apex and its use cases. So first of all, let's learn about what is Dynamic Apex. Dynamic Apex, as per the Salesforce documentation, enable developers to create more flexible applications. In other words, we can say that using Dynamic Apex, you can write generic code that can be reused again and again with multiple S objects. This means that while working with Dynamic Apex, you are not writing code for any particular S object. You are not writing code for account or lead or opportunity or contact. You are writing code which is generic in nature and that can be reused with any kind of S object. Let's have a look at some of the use cases to understand how that works. The first use case that we have here is to get all object API names along with their labels. It happens a couple of times when you are working with Lightning component that you need to fetch all the objects that are present in your org and you need to display a list of those objects. Okay, for example, let's say you're creating something for data load. Okay, you're creating a custom component for data load, or another good example can be S object converter, which we created in one previous video. So if you see in this S object converter, what we are doing, we are converting records of one S object into another S object. So in this case, I need to display all the objects that are present in my Salesforce org right here in the pick list, where I'm displaying the labels of the S objects as the, you can say, label in the pick list, and the value or the API name of the S object is going to be the value of the pick list, right? So in this case, I can select one S object from here and one S object from here. For example, I can convert my lead records into account directly by using the S object converter. So in such kind of use cases, we need to use Dynamic Apex. Now let's have a look at a method that we created for this purpose and understand how that works. This is the class that I have created. It is named as ApexUtil, and this class is having a method named as getObjectAPIName to label. This method is going to return me a map of string and string, which will consist of all object API names along with their labels that are present in my Salesforce org. So what we are doing here, we are using the schema class, which is an internal class present in Salesforce, and this class is having a getGlobalDescribe method, which is going to return us the details of all the S objects that are present in Salesforce. So this method is going to give us a map of string and schema.SObjectType. If you consider the schema here, this is not the class, this is particularly the namespace. So don't get confused by schema. This schema is the class and this is the method of the class. However, this schema is nothing but a namespace, and we have a class under that namespace which is of SObjectType. Okay, so the class name here is SObjectType. This method is basically going to return us a map of string and S object type. So it is basically going to give us a list of, or you can say a map of all the S objects that are present in my Salesforce org. So what I am doing after getting this map, I am iterating all the elements of this map one by one, and for each element or for each entry that is present inside the map, we are getting the S object type by using the key of the map. Okay, and once we have the S object type, our task is to get the API name and the label of that S object, right? So in order to get the API name or label, we need to call another method which is known as getDescribe method. So this getDescribe method is present under SObjectType class, and this method is going to return us the details or the metadata of a particular S object. So this metadata is of type describe S object result. This is another internal class which is present in Salesforce under the schema namespace. Once we have the metadata of the particular S object, we need to get the label and the API name. So what I'm doing here, I have created a map of string and string which I'm going to return from the method. And inside this map, I'm putting the API name of the object, which we are getting by using getName method. And we are also putting the label of the object, which we are getting by using getLabel method. So in this way, we are creating a map of string and string here, which will consist of the API name of the object as the key and the label of the object as a value. And finally, we are returning this map. So let's execute this code quickly and let's see it in action. So I'm just going to execute this particular code. So here I have called the getObjectAPIName to label method of my ApexUtil class, and if we see the result, we can see that I'm getting a map of API name to label. If you see here, this is the API name of the object, which is AI application, and this is the label of the object, which is present in my Salesforce org. It consists of all the objects that are present inside Salesforce. It doesn't matter whether I have access to those objects or not. So it is going to return me all the objects, whether those are internal objects or, the objects that are visible to me as a user. So this is one object which is AI application and the label is AI application. This is another object which is AI data definition and the label is data definition. Similarly, we have a lot of objects which are coming right here. Okay. Although if you want, you can add an if condition right here before putting the object API name and the label into a map, and you can check whether you have access to this object or not. There are some methods which are present under the describe as object result class, using which you can check that whether as a user you have access to those object records or not. Okay, and if you have access, only then you can put them in the map and you can return that map. This is similar to what we are doing right here in the subject converter, because we are not getting all the objects here, we are only getting the objects to which we have access to. Speaking of that, let's move on to the next section, which is checking object permissions for the logged in user. Sometimes it's important to understand whether the subject that we are dealing with is accessible to us or not. For example, if I consider the same example of a subject converter, if I'm going to convert lead records into account, then I should have access to lead object as well, and I should have access to account object as well, right? Let's have a look at this code snippet to understand how we can check the permissions for an subject. So this is the API name of an object which we are dealing with currently, and we are using get subject type method to return the subject type of the current subject. After we have the subject type, we are using getDescribe method to get the describe subject result. So this code is similar to what we did right here. First of all, we are getting the subject type, and then we are using getDescribe method to get the describe subject result, which is nothing but the details of the metadata of current subject. For now, I'm using this appointment topic time slot feed object. You can also use account object right here. So let's take account object for example. I'm getting the subject type, and then I'm getting the describe result of that subject. After that, I can check or I can apply various methods which are present in describe subject result class to understand various properties of data subject. For example, if data subject is standard or custom, so I can use isCustom method. I can get the API name of the object by using the getName method. So getName method is similar to what we were using here, like getName. Okay, this is the same method. We can also use isAccessible method to understand whether that object is accessible to us or not. We can also use isCreatable method, isUpdatable method, isDeletable method to understand whether we can, create, update or delete the records of data subject. So let me just execute this code and let's see what happens. So right now we are checking for account subject, and if we see the result, we can see that the account subject has an API name of account, and it is not a custom object. That is why isCustom object is coming as false, and it is accessible to me. I can create the account record, I can update account record, and I can delete account record as well. So using these methods, we can check whether I am able to create, update or delete the records of the particular subject I am dealing with. This is really important when we are dealing with dynamic Apex. Similarly, I can check for the previous subject as well, which was there. So let me just execute this code again. And if I just check it quickly, the API name is same. It is not a custom object, so it is false. It is accessible to me. I cannot create the records, I cannot update the records, although I can delete the records for this subject. Okay, so this is how you can get the data for any kind of subject that you are dealing with while working with dynamic Apex. Now let's move on to the next section, which is another use case, and this use case is get all fields for an object. So initially what we did, we get the map of all the objects that are present inside Salesforce. Now, once you have a particular subject, you need to get all the fields that are present for that particular subject. This is very useful specifically when you are working with SOQL queries. Okay, in case you want to create a dynamic SOQL query, you need to get all the fields for an object that are present in Salesforce. So in order to get the fields, I have created this method which is named as get subject fields, and this method is going to receive the object name in the parameter, and it will give me a set of all the fields that are present for that particular subject. So what we have done inside this method, we have created a set named as field names, which will store the API name of all the fields. And after that, first of all, we are getting a map of all the subjects by using schema.getGlobalDescribe. So I hope this method is clear to you. It is the same that we used above. And once we have a map, we are getting the subject type for the object name that we pass in the parameter. So this object name that we pass in the parameter, it should be the API name of the object. And we are passing that API name, and we are getting the subject type for the current subject. Once we have the subject type, we are just checking that if this subject type instance is not equal to null. This null check is necessary because it is possible when you are dealing with dynamic Apex that you are passing some API name which is not valid, right? So if this subject type instance is not equal to null, I am going to get the detail of this particular subject by using the getDescribe method, and this getDescribe method is going to give me describe subject result class instance. This is the same case that we are getting right here, describe subject result class instance. So this instance is nothing, it will give me the detail of or the metadata of that particular subject, right? And this class is also having a fields property, and this fields property can be used to get a map of all the fields that are present for that particular subject by using the getMap method. So this map is going to be nothing but a map of string and schema.SObject field. So this schema is again a namespace, and this is the class name, which is SObject field, which is present under the same namespace. So once we have a field map, we are going to iterate this map one by one. We are going to get the detail or the metadata about each and every field by using the getDescribe method on the field, and this will give us describe field result instance. And using that field result, we can check that if this field is accessible to me. It is the same case that I talked about, that if you want, you can put a check here that if the object is accessible to you. So similarly, I'm checking here that if this field is accessible to me, then I'm going to add the API name of the field, which I'm getting using getName method, to the field name set, and I'm returning it right here. So this is very similar to what we did in case of object. We were using the getName method, we were using the describe SObject result. The only difference is, in this case, first of all, I'm using the fields property to get the map of the fields by using the getMap method on the fields property. And once I have the field map, I'm iterating this map to get the field result, which will give me the metadata about a particular SObject field. And then I'm checking if this field is accessible or not. And if the field is accessible, I'm just getting the API name of the field and I'm storing it in my field set, or I can say my set of string, which is of field names. Finally, I'm returning this field names. Now let's execute this code and let's see what happens if I get the fields of a particular SObject. So we can try it with account object. Let me just execute this code. So if you see, I'm calling get SObject fields and I'm passing the API name of the object as account. And if you see here, we are getting all the fields that are present for a particular object, which is account number, account source, annual revenue, billing address, billing city, etc., etc. Okay. Similarly, I can check it for any kind of SObject. Let's say you want to check for lead. Okay. So you can just specify the API name. It will even work for any kind of custom object. I'm getting address, annual revenue, city, clean status, company, or let me check for opportunity as well. Opportunity. So for opportunity, we are getting account ID, amount, campaign ID, close date, contact ID, created by ID, created date, right? So these are all the fields of the opportunity which are accessible to me as a user. So what you understood right now, we learned about how can we get a list of all SObjects or a map of all SObjects that are present in my org. We learned about how can we get fields for a particular SObject. Now it's time to construct a dynamic SOQL query. So it's time to put our knowledge into action, which we have learned till now. And let's see how can we construct a dynamic SOQL query by using dynamic Apex. This is very, very important use case of dynamic Apex, because dynamic SOQL query is something that you can use in a variety of use cases. Let's say you want to integrate with some external system, then also you can use dynamic SOQL query so that all the fields for an object is directly added into the query, and you are getting the record with everything and you are passing it to an external system. So I think we have covered all this. Yeah, I'm just using this code snippet to show you the details of all the fields. So let me just check it for employee. Instead of employee, we can use opportunity here, and we can execute this code. So it will give us a list of field names that I'm iterating to show you each field one by one. Oh, sorry, it should be apex util.getSObject fields. Yeah. Yeah. So if you see, I'm getting all the fields. ID is deleted, account ID, type, next step, all the fields that are present for opportunity record. Okay, so let's move on to dynamic SOQL now. This is another very important use case, and let's see what we can do and how can we construct a dynamic SOQL. So in order to construct dynamic SOQL, what I have done, I have created another method here which is known as getSOQL, and this method will just accept the object name and it will give you an SOQL query or a SOQL query with all the fields that are present for that subject in Salesforce. What we are doing inside this method, we are calling our getSObject fields method, which we constructed just above this method itself, and we are passing the object API name right here, and we are getting all the fields name. And after that, it is very simple. We are just constructing a SOQL query dynamically. So we have a query initialized here. String query is equal to select and then a space, and then I'm iterating my fields array or the field set to construct a SOQL query, and I'm appending each and every field API name to my query one by one, and I'm adding a comma and I'm adding a space after that. Okay. So what this will do, this will get all the field names for a particular SObject whose name is passed in the parameter, and then it will construct a SOQL query. So the SOQL query will look something like this: select, and then we have a space. After that, we have all the field names which are present in my set appended with a comma. So it will be like for opportunity, it can be like account ID, and then let's say annual revenue, and then all the fields name right there. Okay. And once I have all the field names, what I'm doing, I'm just using this particular method, which is a substring method on the query string, to remove this last comma which I have. So I'm just checking that get the substring from the initial index, which is 0, till the last index of comma, which is the last particular comma which is appended after the last field name. And after that, I'm just appending from, and I'm appending the object name. So it will give me the whole SOQL query, which is constructed with all the fields present for a particular subject. Let me just execute this method and it will be more clear. So let's get a dynamic SOQL for account object with all the fields. So if you see here, I have used the get SOQL method and I have passed the object name as account. And this is the SOQL query. So if you see here, let me just close this one. Select ID is deleted, master record ID, and all the fields I have in the SOQL query. After that, I have from and then account. So this is the SOQL query which I'm talking about. And if you see, I don't need to add each and every field one by one. I can just call one method. I can just pass the object name and I'm getting a SOQL query with all the fields appended in the query itself. And in case I'm dealing with some other S object, I can just change the API name. So I can just write opportunity here, and I'll have a SOQL query with all the fields of opportunity. And if you see, I have the SOQL query with all the fields of opportunity, like account ID is private, name, description, stage name, amount, probability, expected revenue, etc. So this is how easy it is to construct a SOQL query by using Dynamic Apex. So let's see, we learned about Dynamic Apex, and we can also execute this query by using database.query method. Okay. So let me just create a new account real quick and we'll see how that works. So test account. And let me add some other fields as well. For example, rating is warm and ownership is private and industry is apparel. This is something else, and let's save it. Okay. So I have one account in my org now, and I'm going to use this query actually. So what I'm doing, I'm first of all getting the query. So let's say my query is equal to apexutil.get SOQL, and I'm going to give account here. And after that, I can use database.query method to actually query the records. So let's say list of S object and records is equal to database.query and then my query. So database is another internal class of Salesforce, and it has a query method in which you can pass a string query and it will query all the records. And finally, I can just, display those records. So system.debug and then records. Let's see how that works. So if you see, I'm getting one account record, which I created just now. And this is all the information about that record. If you see, the name is test account and the type is customer channel, the industry is apparel. Similarly, I can check it right here as well. The name is test account, industry is apparel, type is customer channel. Okay. So that's how you can use this query in your code and you can extract information from Salesforce. Now let's move on to the next use case of Dynamic Apex, which is get picklist field values. So this is another very common use case of Dynamic Apex, because whenever you are dealing with Lightning components, it is fairly common that you need to construct a picklist and you need to show the picklist values along with their labels in the picklist itself, right? So let's see how we can get the picklist values using Dynamic Apex. So in order to get the picklist values, what I have done, I have created another method here that you can reuse. So I'm going to give you all the code at the end of the video, and you will find a link in the description of the video itself. So let me just check this method, which is get picklist values map, and this method is going to return me a map of picklist value along with their labels. So this map is basically accepting the object API name and the field API name in the parameters, where the object API name will be any kind of object, for example account, and the field API name will be the field of that object, which is a picklist field. So it can be like type. Inside this method, we have created a map which is known as picklist field map. So this map will be returned and it will consist of picklist values along with their labels. So what we are doing here, first of all, we are getting the information of all the subjects that are present in Salesforce by using the get global describe method. Once we have the information of all the subjects, or we can say the map of all the subjects, I'm passing my object API name to get the information for my particular subject. Okay. And we are using the get describe method on that subject to get the metadata of that particular subject. Once we have the metadata and this will be nothing but describe as object result. If you remember, we used the same method previously as well, where we were getting the describe for that particular S object, and it is going to return me describe as object result. Okay. So once we have the describe as object result, I'm using the fields property on that class, and I'm getting a map of all the fields by using the get map method. So this is also similar to what we have done before. We are using the fields property and we are using the get map method to get a map of all the field keys along with their HL metadata. So once I have a map of all the fields, I'm passing on my API name, my field API name, which is nothing the API name of the picklist field, and I'm getting the result, or I can say the metadata of that particular field, which will be nothing but describe field result. Okay. So this is something which we have done before as well. So I'm just using the get describe method to get the describe field result. So once I have the field result, because this is the thing that I require, I have the object name, I have the field API name, I need to get the metadata for that particular field so that I can extract the picklist values as well as the picklist labels for that picklist field. Okay. But before extracting the picklist values, as we are dealing with dynamic apex, we need to check whether this is an actual field or not, and whether this is a picklist field or not, right? After that, I'm just checking if the field result is not equal to null, and if the get type of this field result, or I can say the type of this particular field, is nothing but picklist. So this get type method is going to return me a value of display type, and this display type is nothing but a enum which store all the field properties. Let me just show that to you as well. So this display type is a enum which is present in the schema namespace, and it will show you, or it will tell you the type of the field that you are dealing with. So it will return something like this. Okay. So in my case, it is going to return me picklist, and I can simply compare it. So I'm just comparing that if the type of the field is nothing but schema.displayType.picklist. If the enum is same, that means this is a picklist field, so I can get all the picklist entries. So what we can do, we can again use the field result, which is nothing but describe field result, and we can use the get picklist values method on this field result class, which will give us a list of picklist entries. And this picklist entries will consist of all the API names, or I can say the value of the picklist as well and the label of the picklist as well. So we are iterating these picklist entries one by one, and for each picklist entry, I'm going to check that if this picklist entry is active, because if you remember in Salesforce, we can also have picklist entries that are not active, which are disabled or that are not currently active. So I'm just going to check that if this particular picklist entry is active, then I'm going to get the label of the picklist and I'm going to store it in here, picklist label. I'm also going to get the value of the picklist, which is nothing but the API, and I'm going to store it in here, and I'm populating my map with the picklist value as well as the picklist label. And finally, we are returning the map from this method. So let's just execute this code and let's see how it works. So I'm going to get the type picklist values for the account S object. And if you see, I'm getting a map here. So this is the API name, or I can say the value of the picklist, and this is the label of the picklist. So this is channel partner, and then customer channel, and customer direct, installation partner, other, prospect, technology partner. So all these are nothing but the type of the accounts. Okay. I can show it to you in Salesforce as well. So if you see the type picklist, these are the values: prospect, customer direct, customer channel, installation partner, technology partner, and these are the values that I'm getting right here. Okay. So this is how you can just create a method in which you can pass the object API name and the field API name, and you can get all the picklist values along with their API names and the labels as well. I can also show that to you in Salesforce. So here are the account fields, and this is the type field of the account, and here we have the API name, and here we have the label of the picklist. Okay. So I'm getting everything right here. So in this case, the get label method will return us the value, which is shown right here, and the get value method is going to return us the API name, which is shown right here. Let's move on to the next use case of dynamic apex, which is getting the record type ID by using the record type name. So this is another very common use case, which is a good practice as well, that is to use record type names instead of the record type IDs, because when you are migrating from, let's say, developer to QA environment or from QA to production environment, your record type IDs basically change, right? So it's important to use record type name or developer name in the code instead of the record type ID. So we can use dynamic apex to get the record type ID by using the record type name. Let's see how. For this purpose, what we have done, we have created another method which is known as get record type IDs by name. So this method is basically going to give me a map of string and ID, which will be nothing but a map of developer name of the record type and the ID of the record type. In this method, I'm passing the object API name as a parameter. So let's see what we are doing inside this method. First of all, I'm using getGlobalDescribe method to get the data of all the S objects that are present inside Salesforce. Once we have that information, I'm using the object API name and I'm getting the detail of that particular S object. Okay. So once we have the object result, which is nothing the describe as object result for the current S object, we are just checking that if this object result is not equal to null, and we are using get record type enforce method to get the information about record types of that particular S object. So this method will return us a list of record type info which is present under the schema namespace. So record type info is another inner class which is already present in Salesforce. So I can see the predefined class which is present in Salesforce, and this record type info class will give you the information about the record type. So I'm just iterating each and every record type info record one by one, and after that we are checking if this record type is active and if the current record type is available to the current logged in user. What we are going to do, we are going to put the API name of the record type and we are going to put the ID of the record type in a map of string and ID. So the getName method can be used to get the API name of the record type, and getRecordTypeID method can be used to get the ID of the record type. And finally, we are returning this map. So let me just check it for a particular S object and let's see how it works. So let me just execute this code for the account S object again. And if you see, I'm calling my getRecordTypeIDs by name method. And if you see right here, we are getting the master record type, which is nothing but the default record type for account. And this is the record type ID. Okay. So right now we don't have any account record type present inside Salesforce. That is why we are only getting one record type. But let me just quickly create one more record type here. So let's say our record type name is business. Okay. And I'm going to keep all the things as default. Let's select a page layout. So, and click on save. So if you see, I have another record type created here, which is named as business. And if I just execute this method again, so this time we are getting two record types. One is business and this is the record type ID, and one is master and this is the record type ID. So that's how we can use this particular map to get the record type ID by using the record type name. So once we have the map available, we can simply, get any kind of record type ID by just passing in the record type name, and the map will return us the record type ID. Another use case for dynamic Apex is dynamic SOSL. This is very similar to what we have learned in dynamic SOQL. So I'm not going to get into this in detail, but I can just show you an example. So this is the SObject converter that we have created in one of the previous video. And for this SObject converter, we have a method, because in this converter, what we do, we first of all select the account object and we select the destination object. Let's say I want to convert an account into a lead. So I can add some text, for example, test account. So it will give me the account. So in this case, I'm using dynamic SOSL because the object name is also dynamic and the text is also obviously dynamic, right? So I'm getting my account, I'm clicking on adding record, and then I can define a mapping and convert records, right? So I can particularly define the mapping like name to last name, and I can click on convert record to convert the account record into lead record, right? So this is one use case where we are using dynamic SOSL, and if I just show you the code, this is the method which we are using to query the records. And if you see, in this case, we are constructing the SOSL query by specifying the object name dynamically, and we are using this dynamic SOSL to get the records and return those records. So that's all for this tutorial, everyone. I hope you liked it. All the code regarding the Apex Util class, which is a very important helper class, you can use this class in your own projects. You can find it right here. So you can go to my blog, and I'll also add a link of my GitHub gist in the description of the video. So you'll find all the code regarding this class right here, and you can use it. Okay. So I hope you liked this video. Let me know your feedback in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a good day. Bye-bye.